apologist here at Catholic Answers, the author of The Bible is a Catholic Book, the author of The Fathers Know Best, the author of A Daily Defense, 365 Days Plus One to Becoming a Better Apologist, and many other things, as well as the proprietor of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. Hi, Jimmy.
Hi, Cy Kellett. I'm Jimmy Akin, Senior Apologist at Catholic Answers. You are the host of Catholic Answers Live, if I understand correctly.
You do, in fact, understand correctly.
Awesome. I love correct understanding.
Has there been a glitch in the Matrix? I thought that you seem to be establishing facts that had already been in evidence.
Well, it never hurts to be sure.
Okay. Well, I hope you are sure. You have to believe me in order to be sure.
That's true. You could be lying.
I'm not, though. I'm Cy Kellett, host of Catholic Answers Live. 888-318-7884 is our number. As I said, any call at all is welcome. Jimmy, tomorrow, Friday, another Mysterious World?
Yes.
What can we expect?
Well, so last Friday we did one on the new government UFO report and talked about that. So it's something completely different, of course. This time we're going to be talking about a woman named Pauline Dakin. And she is, today she's a journalism professor, but she had a bizarre secret childhood. Her mom would move her and her brother periodically with no warning. They were to a whole new town.
Wow.
Like halfway across the continent. And she was not allowed, she and her brother were not allowed to tell people when they were going on vacation or where they were going on vacation. Her mom would suddenly take them out of school for a surprise picnic in the forest. They would suddenly change their dinner plans. One day she came home and mom was throwing away everything in the fridge. Another time, she and her brother had walked across the carpet, and all of a sudden her mom has them wash their feet, put on socks and plastic bags over their socks, and then go out to dinner for a couple of hours and see a movie. And whenever she and her brother would ask why these strange things were happening, her mom would say, "I'll tell you when you're older."
And did she?
And when Pauline was in her early 20s, her mom summoned her to a hotel room, made her take off all of her jewelry, and then she and the family pastor told her the reason for all of this.
What?
And it blew Pauline's mind. And that was only the beginning of Pauline's introduction into a secretive realm called the Weird World.
Okay. The only possible answer is aliens.
No.
It's really? It's
Nothing
not
to
aliens.
do with aliens.
What? Oh, I got to hear this one. Oh, Jimmy, you set that up. Good. It sounds like it might be slightly traumatic, however. Is this something she had to recover from this childhood, or was...
She and her brother are both actually healthy, well-adjusted adults.
Huh. That's a pretty good accomplishment.
Yeah.
Again, the number 888-318-7884. Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. It's out there on the internet. Just type in Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World or Jimmy Akin. You're gonna come upon it, and you can find out about the Weird World. The Weird World. All right.
That's what the insiders called it.
No, the insiders. Oh.
The outsiders didn't know it existed.
Oh no. Oh, no, I'm freaked out again. Let's start with Jose in Tucson, Arizona, watching on YouTube. Jose, thank you very much for your call. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Well, I've done most of your apologetics courses online, and I found them very helpful. However, it kind of intrigued me to ask you if you can give me a suggestion or recommendation on some theological courses, also philosophical courses that would kind of strengthen my wanting to, do apologetics. Is there something that a layperson can do that won't cost a fortune to achieve?
Well, so I would say a few things. First of all, we have plans to add philosophy and theology courses to the School of Apologetics. So, we're building our curriculum right now, and in the course of time, we will be offering those courses. At least that's the plan. In terms of where to go right now, there are some other platforms that have some material that might meet those needs, you might, for example, check out Formed, which is another platform. Where I would go now, I haven't checked the prices because you mentioned not losing too much money on the deal, but or spending too much money on the deal. But there are universities that offer theology and philosophy courses online. Examples would include Catholic Distance University, which is, of course, set up to do distance education. I know Franciscan University of Steubenville has some distance courses they offer, and there are a lot of others too. Also, getting a good theology book and reading it yourself. I mean, that's one of the cheapest ways to do it. Now, it's not going to be read to you by the professor unless maybe it's an audio book, but just getting your own course materials and studying rather than taking a class per se is something that people can do. That's my primary mode of learning, is just teaching myself out of books and stuff, or these days also watching YouTube.
Okay, Jose?
Thank you very much. And before I go, I just wanted to put pressure on Cy to come out with the audiobook of his newest book. Make it into a audiobook.
When's that going to happen, Cy?
That's so funny because Jose, thank you for saying that. It's funny because just this very morning I was talking with Eric, who is the guy. Eric does audio work here, and he's the guy that puts it together. I have finished reading it, and I specifically asked him. I said, was there problems with my reading? Because I'm happy to redo it. And he said, no, it's not a problem with the reading, but they just have another really big project they're working on, and then they'll get to it. So then I'll get it to you. Okay, Jose?
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. That's very kind of you to ask about my book. Our number again, 888-318-7884. Jimmy Akin is our guest. And up next, we go to St. Louis, Missouri, listening on Apple, on the Apple podcast. I didn't know that we were there live. Charlie, are you there with us?
Yeah, hi. How are you guys?
Very well, thank you. Thank you for your call. What's your question for Jimmy?
Yeah, so my wife and I we're both Catholic, and we've been sort of friendly debating each other. And she has been learning, and she brought this up with me, and I find it very interesting, that when St. Augustine translated the Bible from Greek to Latin, that the word, I think it's ainos, I think, Jimmy, maybe you can help me out, but it like meant like age long, or I think I looked it up, practically eternal, which doesn't mean eternal, and I think it had to do with like hell not being eternal, and like, God will come and save people in hell. So I'm confused, because if hell isn't eternal, why purgatory? Or, now we're sort of like, they can't be synonymous. So we're just sort of confused on like what that word, when it was translated from Greek to Latin, meant. Does it actually mean eternal, or
is hell eternal, Jimmy?
So, so first of all, it wasn't St. Augustine who translated the Bible from Greek to Latin. In fact, St. Augustine didn't even speak Greek. He was a Latinist, and he may have spoken like Berber or something, but he thought and spoke and wrote primarily Latin. The one who's famous for translating the Bible for the original languages, and he's far from the only one, but the one who's famous for it is St. Jerome. And he translated the Old Testament from the original Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek, and then the New Testament from the Greek. And the word that gets used in Greek for forever is aion, and it's simply the Greek equivalent of another Old Testament term that gets used in the Old Testament, which is olam. And these terms have a range of meaning. They don't automatically by themselves mean forever, but they can, for example, be used to mean for an age. Or an age. An olam can just be a long period of time. But there are ways of communicating the concept of forever using these terms. For example, in the Greek New Testament, you'll frequently find the aion word used in a way that if you translate it literally into English, it would be the age of the ages. Mm-hmm. And so what it's doing is envisioning all of the different ages put together as one giant age, and that is another way of saying forever. It's the age of all of the ages. And so you do have ways of communicating very clearly the concept of forever. And one of those is in connection with the punishment of the damned. If you look in Revelation chapter 14, you'll see a description of what happens to the beast and his followers, and it says that the smoke of their torment goes up forever and ever, and they shall have no rest day or night. So this indicates that this punishment is unending. Now, really from a theological perspective, we know that it's a self-imposed punishment. It's not like God is a cosmic torturer. Instead, this is a way of expressing that these people have fundamentally chosen to reject God, and they therefore don't want to be with God, and they therefore are cutting themselves off from the source of all joy and goodness, and that naturally frustrates them because, if you cut yourself off from the source of all joy, then guess what? You don't have any joy. But nevertheless, this is understood by the church to be a permanent state based on what Scripture teaches. And so it is different than purgatory. Also, purgatory is different in other ways, too. If you look in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, it has sections both on hell and on purgatory. And if you look in the section on hell, it will note that this is eternal. But in the section on purgatory, it makes an additional point, which is that whatever suffering is involved in purgatory is entirely different than the punishment of the damned. Its purpose is fundamentally different. It's to help liberate us from disordered attachments to things so that we're fully open to God and that we're fully purified. And it's kind of, if you want to think about it this way, the spiritual equivalent of physical therapy. You go to physical therapy, sometimes it hurts, but it makes your body whole, it heals you. And that's what's going on in purgatory. So it's not just a difference in time or length that makes purgatory different than hell. There's also a difference in what's happening.
Charlie, thank you very much. Appreciate the question. We'll have to leave it there because we have to take our first break. It's open forum. Jimmy Akin is our guest for both hours today. We'll be right back with more questions for Jimmy right after this.
We're here for you. Call now. Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Hey, this is Michael O'Neill, the Miracle Hunter. I'll be delving into the fascinating world of miracles and taking you on a hunt that explores the greatest mysteries and marvels of the Catholic Church. I'll be examining what constitutes a miracle, how miracles are investigated and approved, and the role they play in the lives of the faithful. We'll look at the miracles of the Gospels and early Christianity, considering the claims of the miraculous in our own modern age.
The Miracle Hunter, Saturday at 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. And before we head back to the phones, it's open forum. Jimmy Akin here as our guest. The 50% off on every single one of the Catholic Answers 20 Answers books. Jimmy's a recent one from Jimmy, Anti-Catholic Myths. Is that the most recent one? I think probably.
I don't remember.
Anti-Catholic Myths. I thought it was a great topic.
Mm-hmm. I think that was the most recent.
Yeah. But a nice, succinct way of addressing some of those things that are very commonly said about Catholics that are, in fact, myths. But there's dozens and dozens of these 20 Answers books. They're not very expensive to start with, $2 or $3 each, but right now they're 50% off at shop.catholic.com. Up next, right here in California, listening on Catholic.com, Joseph. Joseph, go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. I have a question regarding Matthew chapter 16, verse 18. Mm-hmm. It's a well-known verse. If you look, I used to be Protestant, and I used to read the King James Version. The part I'm asking you about is, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. Mm-hmm. Now, the Catholic Bible, NAB, it states it, and the gates of the netherworld shall not prevail against it. Mm-hmm. A lot of, at least the Baptists that I know, do not understand how Christians can be in hell, and they can't explain this. I heard you give an explanation a while back regarding the Apostles' Creed, the part that says, according to Jesus, that he descended into hell. At that time, you gave two really good explanations. The first one, you said that the word hell, when the creed was written, if I'm quoting you correctly, that the word hell there meant death, the grave, not being into the fiery part of hell where you're burning. And then you also said that Jesus could have gone into that part of hell to show everybody there that God's promise had come true,
Joseph,
and he was there to show.
I feel like you're giving us a really good review, but I got to get you to a question. Do you have a question for Jimmy?
Yes, I do. My question is, the gates of Hades or the gates of hell, is it just meaning the grave, like in the definition of the creed?
So in Matthew 16:18, the word that is used, that is translated hell here in various translations, and it's not along Protestant Catholic lines, you'll find this word translated different ways. The word is Hades. And one way of bringing that into English is to just transliterate it and say Hades. The problem is, in English, Hades is often used as a synonym for hell, the place of the damned. Now, originally, hell in English, this is in older English, did not mean the place of the damned. It just meant the place of all the dead. So if you were dead, you were in hell. That didn't mean you were suffering, because you might not be one of the damned, but you were said to be in hell. This is like in Old English. Because of the way the term hell has shifted in English to now where it just means the place of the dead, it's prompted other Bible translators to take another look at how should we translate this word here, because in Greek, Hades only means the place of the dead, not the place of the damned. And netherworld is a possible translation. It's not the only one, but it's a possible translation. So what Jesus is saying here is that the gates of the netherworld, meaning the place of the dead, will never prevail against the church. And that's another way of saying the church will never die. So Jesus is not talking about Christians being in either the place of the damned or the place of the dead. He's talking about the church is never going to die.
Joseph, thank you. I hope that was helpful to you. We're going to keep going because there's lots of folks on the line. Jimmy Akin is our guest. It's open forum. And now we go to Knoxville, Tennessee. Sean, listening on the new and improved Catholic Answers Live app. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy Akin.
Hi. Thanks, guys. Take my call. It's a real slick app. So I'm a
thank you.
Catholic revert. Welcome. So I started doing Kendo. It's a Japanese swordplay martial art.
Mm-hmm.
It's fun, good exercise. But when you enter the dojo, you have to turn around and bow, profound bows. There's kneeling and prostrations. Knees, head forward to the ground,
mm-hmm.
and that's stuff that Western culture, maybe a Japanese Catholic wouldn't have a problem, but that's stuff that I reserve for Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
In front of the tabernacle or an adoration. So I'm not sure, do I need to, back off of that, or basically tell the sensei, the person, hey, I like the martial art, the skill, but, no offense, the bowing is not really to seem misplaced reverence.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's, a flesh offered to idols type of situation where in the back of my mind, I know there's no effect here.
Okay, Sean.
Yeah, so what to do in this situation is up to you. There is no intrinsically wrong body posture, and there is no intrinsic association with a body posture in any particular meaning, when it comes to reverence. So if you, in good conscience, are able to recognize that, this is not worship, I'm just doing this because it's part of the tradition, then it's fine to do it. On the other hand, if you really feel uncomfortable with that and you're not able to get over that, well, then it could make sense to say, this isn't my thing. I was raised in a different tradition, and while I respect Japanese culture and the traditions associated with kendo, there are things that I don't personally feel comfortable doing, at least these particular ones. And if the sensei understands that, great. If not, you might have to find yourself a new dojo.
Thanks, Sean. Hope that was helpful to you. Jennifer in South Dakota is next, listening on Real Presence Radio. Jennifer, you there with us?
Yep. Hi.
Hi, Jennifer. Go ahead with your question.
Yeah. So I had seen a video recently, and I'm sure you've heard people, like, they get upset that wealthy people like Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk, they have all this money and they don't do things like solve world hunger. And this video made a claim that instead of being upset at people like that, you should really be upset at the Vatican and like the Catholic Church as a whole, because supposedly they have enough wealth to solve world hunger twice over.
Wow.
They're a charity technically, so so you should be upset at them. And I have like my own ideas on how I would respond to that, but I just wanted to hear what Jimmy's take on that was.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer.
Well, there would be different ways of approaching it. One way of approaching it would be to simply share the facts with them. Another way would be to turn the question around and put them on the defensive. You could say, okay, you're making these claims. What's your basis? How much money would it take to solve world hunger? Because it's not just buying food for everybody. I mean, that's a lot, but if you're talking about actually solving world hunger, that doesn't mean giving everyone in the world a hamburger on a given day. It means having permanent food supply being delivered to people on a permanent basis. And the problem is actually not that that we don't have enough food. We got plenty of food for everybody on Earth. The problem is we have pockets on Earth that are economically and politically underdeveloped that prevent the adequate distribution of food in those areas. That's the real reason for hunger. It's corruption and lack of economic development in impoverished areas. If everybody in the world adopted economic and political systems like in the developed world, and if those were consistently applied throughout given nations, there would be no hunger. But let's suppose that you're talking to this person and you're wanting to get them to explain their case. You could say, so how much money would it cost to actually feed world hunger? And how do you know that? I mean, show me the math. Also, how much money does the Catholic Church have? And how much does it have? Because the Catholic Church has a divine mission from Jesus. It's not going to disband. So the Catholic Church has a certain amount of resources that it needs to fulfill its divine mission. How much money does the Catholic Church have above that amount? And how do you know? Have you been doing the auditing? Show me the math. If you can't show me the math, either about world hunger or about how much excess resources the Catholic Church has, then you're just talking without knowledge. You're just making claims that you have no rational basis for. Maybe you heard it from somebody. Maybe it's a claim that tickled your fancy, and so you decided to run with it. But you don't actually have any evidence for it if you haven't been doing the math. So that's one way of approaching it. Another is to simply point out, actually, no, the Catholic Church does not have the money to solve world hunger. The Catholic Church, in fact, runs pretty close to the bone. In many years, recently especially, the Vatican has actually run a deficit. And it is doing things to help support world hunger and medical charities and educational charities and all kinds of different charities around the world. But actually, the Vatican itself tends to run at a deficit, or at least it frequently has in recent years. What it does have is some fancy churches that have been built over the centuries. Could those be sold off? Well, hypothetically, but they were based on donations. And if donors give you money for a purpose, like I want to build a church that will be beautiful and glorify God, you can't misappropriate the funds and divert them to something else. Like saying, oh, well, the donors wanted us to build a big cathedral that would glorify God, but now that we've received the donors' money, we're going to sell it off and spend it on something else. That's called misappropriation of funds. So the practical reality is that the world hunger, to the extent it's there, unfortunately, it's nowhere near as bad as it used to be, is a problem of lack of economic development and political corruption. And by the way, Jeff Bezos and other people like that have a way more positive profit position than the Catholic Church does.
Jennifer, thank you so much for the question. Boy, lots and lots of calls. So good thing we got Jimmy with us for 2 hours. We'll be right back with more Open Forum on Catholic Answers Live.
Catholic Answers Live.
Here's a question. Is it really possible to be friends with someone who died 2,000 years ago? Maybe the problem is that we've grown way too comfortable with the story of Jesus. Nice man, right? Taught us to love one another, said not to judge people. We celebrate his birthday every year. It's time to put away this small, safe version of Jesus, says Cy Kellett. Nobody that bland could have transformed the world. In A Teacher of Strange Things, Cy presents Jesus Christ undiluted by sentiment, with all his radical words and deeds uncensored. Do you know someone, your son or daughter perhaps, or maybe your mom or dad, who needs the friendship of Jesus Christ? Do you? Order your copy of A Teacher of Strange Things by visiting shop.catholic.com today or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Catholic Answers is doing it again. We're holding our 7th annual Apologetics Conference this September in beautiful San Diego, California, and we'd like to see you there. Join us September 23rd to 26th for a lively and inspiring conference with an all-star lineup of speakers guaranteed to jumpstart your faith. It's a great chance to meet all your favorite Catholic Answers apologists and very special guests as we spend 4 days talking about worshiping and adoring our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. This is where it all begins. Don't miss what promises to be the event of the season. Join us this September for a conference that is sure to ignite, inspire, and inform your faith. Seats are still available, but they're going fast. Enter promo code EARLY to save $30. Visit CatholicAnswersConference.com or call 888-291-8000 to register.
What's the one mistake you'll never make again?
That's tomorrow on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie on most of these EWTN stations.
Now back to Catholic Answers Live.
Very groovy, Brandon. Very groovy, baby. Thank you very much for the groovy music. I've noticed, however, with when you're here, Brandon, we might hear that groovy music again. I'm not saying that.
Not that that's a bad
guaranteeing.
thing.
No, I'm just saying. I've noticed you're very generous with the groovy music, and I appreciate it. Our number is 888-318-7884. I'll be honest with you, though, at the moment, lines are full, and we're going to try to get to everybody. Jimmy Akin is our guest, but lucky for us, we got Jimmy for 2 hours. So hang on. If you're online, we'll do our very best to get to you. Let's go to Jamie in Ohio, listening to EWTN on Channel 130, Sirius XM Satellite Radio. Hi, Jamie. You there with us?
Yes, I am.
Hi, Jamie. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
All right, thank you. So I have a teenage son who presents a question statement to me that I know has inaccuracies, but I don't know how to articulate and respond to him.
Okay.
So his statement is, if you have to believe in Christ to go to heaven, and I was lucky enough to be born into a Catholic faith and Christian culture, but there are others in the world who were born into other cultures and faith that aren't as exposed to Christianity. And they, like myself, are just believing in their faith and their culture and living that out, but they don't get to go to heaven. How is that fair? That we just happen to be lucky enough to be born into Christianity.
Well, it wouldn't be fair, and that's why that's not what happens. The situation is different than that, and the fact that your son is a teenager may be something that you can use to help him understand this. When he was younger, there were a lot of things that he didn't know. And so you as a parent, and any parent, it's true in any family, didn't hold him accountable for things that he was innocently unaware of. But as he grew, he gained in knowledge. And so now that he's older, he has more responsibility. He is responsible for the things that he does know. And if he, let's say, neglects his studies and fails to learn something that he should learn, well, he can be held accountable for that. He could get bad grades, for example, or have to go to summer school or something like that. So you as a parent, and it's true in other families as well, because it's just part of good parenting, hold the child accountable for where the child is at. You don't ask more of the child than his age and situation allows for, but if you do hold him accountable for what he is capable of doing and what he does know and what he should know given his age. And the same thing is true of God, who is our Father in heaven. So in the case of people who have never heard about Jesus, God is not going to hold them accountable for not knowing about Jesus if it's through no fault of their own. He will hold them accountable for whatever level of light and grace they have received, but if they live up to that, then they can go to heaven too. They'll be saved through Jesus. They just won't know how that's happening in this life. They'll find out, oh, it was Jesus who saved me in the next life. On the other hand, if someone has been fortunate enough to grow up in a Christian culture, and especially if they've seen the evidence for Jesus Christ, well, then they're held responsible for how they respond to that upbringing and to that evidence. And so there's greater responsibility for those who have been privileged enough to actually learn about God and learn about Jesus and to see the evidence for God and his Son. As Jesus himself said, of whom much is given, much is expected. So the more you've been given, the more you're accountable for how you use the benefits that you've been given.
Jamie, you think that will help your son?
I think that was beautiful. Thank you.
All right, great. Thanks very much. Appreciate that. Let's see, where are we going? We're going to Michigan. Rob in Michigan, listening on Holy Family Radio. You are next. Hi, Rob.
Hey, thanks.
Happy to have you.
Question is, I'm a Protestant, and my understanding of the Catholic view on grace and faith works and grace working together is that you have to be saved by grace through faith, but you also have to have works to shore up your faith. Does that make sense? I'm wondering your view on that.
No, it doesn't. It's not Catholic teaching. What is the absolute that you have to be saved is God's grace. And ordinarily, that's given in response to faith, plus a couple of other actions. The New Testament identifies three things that are part of its message of salvation in different passages. Basically, we need to repent of our sins, we need to believe in Jesus Christ, and we need to be baptized. And you do those three things, and God gives you his grace. Now, he has other ways of giving grace as well. It's like if someone can't be baptized for some reason, God can give them his grace. And as we just discussed in the previous phone call, if someone doesn't know about Jesus through no fault of their own, well, then God can still give them his grace even though they lack faith in Christ, provided they are innocent and are otherwise, living up to the grace that they have received. So the fundamental thing you need is God's grace. And ordinarily, that's given in response to repentance, faith, and baptism. Those are the three things you find in the different biblical passages that deal with how one enters a state of salvation. So let's suppose you do those three things and you enter a state of salvation and you're immediately hit by an asteroid without any chance of doing good works. You will still go to heaven. Good works are not required to get into heaven. You cannot do good works before you get into a state of grace because it's the love of God that he puts in your heart with the state of grace that enables you to do good works to begin with. So you do not do them to get into a state of grace. They do naturally flow from being in a state of grace. St. Paul talks about how we're created in Christ for good works. So they're meant to be part of the Christian life, But even if you don't have them, if you got hit by an asteroid or phasered out of existence or something right after you were baptized, you would still go to heaven because you've got God's grace. So what's the role of works in the Christian life, of good works? Well, they obviously help us grow in our godliness. We become, since a good work is an act of love, we grow in love by doing good works. We do them because of God's grace, but we therefore grow in His grace. We grow in love and holiness, what's sometimes called sanctification, and God promises to reward us for good works that we've done, so that we are also rewarded for them, but we don't have to do them to enter a state of grace. And while doing good works, living a life of love does help build your faith and reinforce your faith, it's not like you will drop out of grace simply for failing to do good works. The only thing that will take you out of a state of grace is a deliberate, knowing grave sin, what's called a mortal sin, where you turn your back on God and say, I don't care about God, I care about this other thing more.
Okay. Rob?
Sounds great. Thank you.
Rob?
I was going to say, we have some resources we might want to send Rob.
I was thinking of sending him a Drama of Salvation.
That would be a good one.
Jimmy wrote a very fine book that explains this in much greater detail, and I think you'll enjoy it, Rob. It's called The Drama of Salvation. And if you'll hang on the line, Nathaniel will get your information, and we'll send you a copy of that book, all right?
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate the call. The number here is 888-318-7884. It's open forum. I think we're going to take a quick break. Before we send you off to the break, though, I do want to tell you what's on the Catholic Answers Focus podcast this week. We do 2 podcasts a week, generally. Every now and then there's a bonus podcast. This week we talk with the wonderful writer and speaker Elizabeth Kelly from the podcast Deep Down Things and other places about is Christianity anti-woman. This is a common kind of trope that Christianity is anti-woman.
Spoiler warning, I think the answer is no.
Dang it, Jimmy, come on. We're trying to hold some suspense here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, but she actually gives...
Well, then I won't tell you what Rosebud was.
Thank you very much. I don't want to start sledding down that hill. Is Christianity, not only does she answer as the yes or no question that is clear in the title, but she also elaborates on why the answer is no. And then we have another one that's a yes or no question, which is also elaborated upon. Layla Miller, we talked with her about, is divorce really a sin? We talk about the sin of divorce with Layla Miller. You can get them both at Catholic Answers Focus. Here's where: YouTube, everywhere they have podcasts, and CatholicAnswersFocus.com.
Hello, this is Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone of San Francisco. Keep your dial tuned to Catholic Answers Live.
She is one of the most beloved saints of all time, honored as the Saint of the Little Way.
Matthew Bunson and the Doctors of the Church.
St. Thérèse of Lisieux entered the Carmelite convent of Lisieux in 1888 and survived only 9 more years. Still, her extraordinary holiness and prayer life prompted her superiors to have her write an autobiography, The Story of a Soul. It became a spiritual classic.
For more about the Doctors of the Church, visit doctorsofthechurch.com.
You've heard that St. Paul Street Evangelization supports hundreds of teams of evangelists sharing the good news. But did you know that some of these teams are public prayer stations? Set up a sign on the sidewalk and offer prayer and encouragement to those you encounter. Everyone needs prayer. Try this new method of witnessing to Jesus. Contact St. Paul Street Evangelization to get started at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
Welcome back. Open forum. Jimmy Akin, Catholic Answers Live. Your call's welcome. One line open right now, 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. We're going to Cincinnati, Ohio now. Dave is listening on Sacred Heart Radio in Cincinnati. Dave, you there with us?
Peace be with you.
And with your spirit. How'd I do? Did I get that? Did I do it? What do you think, Dave?
It's a work in progress.
Oh, come on now, man. All right, go ahead with your question. Now you
My
wished me
question-
peace and then you disturbed my peace, Dave.
I answered your question, and now I'm getting reprimanded for answering your question.
Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. Go ahead with your question for
Apology
Jimmy.
accepted. Jimmy,
Howdy.
I know what you have to put up with.
You have no idea, Dave.
I don't, and I feel sorry for you, Jimmy.
Yeah, it's okay. Don't feel too sorry for me.
Okay, I will. The antediluvians, the folks that lived before the flood.
Yep.
How come they lived so long, and why is Enoch missing? And that's my question.
Okay. So so for folks who may not be familiar, the flood occurs in Genesis 6 to 9, and the lifespans of the people who were mentioned before that, in particular in Genesis 5, are phenomenally long. They all live into hundreds of years. Some of them, like Methuselah, live almost 1,000 years. And then after the flood, even though Noah himself does live for hundreds of years, the lifespans start to drop off pretty quickly thereafter. But it takes a number of generations for that to happen. Now, there's a question about how do we interpret these ages. One option is to interpret them fully literally, according to the way that years are currently reckoned. So these are 365-day years. Another option that has been discussed is to say, well, they're literal, but they're not according to the modern reckoning. Instead, maybe one of these years represents something like a month or something like that. And then a third possibility is these years are not meant to be literal. Now, if you take the first approach, there would be a question of, well, so why would they live so much longer than we do? And the answer for that would have to be purely speculative. I've seen various speculations that have been offered. I'm not particularly impressed by any of them. It could either be something on a natural level, where they just had their really long telomeres or something in their cells, so they didn't age the way we do. And then over the course of time, there was genetic damage that then led to a shortening of the human lifespan. However, we don't have any evidence for that. We don't have any evidence of scientifically in the human genome of anything like that happening. So scientifically, that's not plausible. Hypothetically, they could be supported by God's grace in a way that overrode what their bodies would normally do in the aging process. And so they could have been supernaturally kept from aging and kept from dying. And that might not leave traces in the biological record. What about the second theory? That these are literal but not according to modern reckoning. Maybe a year in this system is something like a month. The problem is you do that, the math doesn't work. The lifespans still don't match up, and the age at which they become fathers still doesn't match up. So like if someone is said to become a father at age 130, well, 100, some of these are
awfully unlikely.
Yeah, some of these, not necessarily that one, but some of them would be very improbable. Also, the fact that the ages drop without changing anything about the language,
right,
means that at some point we are shifting over to modern reckoning. So that's a strike against this being some other form of reckoning, because you've got this relatively smooth drop in the ages. And so that brings us to the third possibility, which is maybe these ages are not literal at all. Maybe they're symbolic numbers that are meant to communicate something. And this is actually common in ancient literature. We find, in Babylonian literature and in Sumerian literature, we find similar ages being attributed to people who lived in the distant past and who were regarded as great heroes and founders of society and things like that. And so in the scholarly community, a standard view is that these are symbolic ages that are meant to communicate the greatness of the ancients, but they're not meant to tell us literally how long they lived. And there may be additional meanings in them. For example, Enoch, you mentioned. Now, the reason Enoch it does not have a fantastically long life, at least not as long as some of the other people like Methuselah, is because God takes him early. He is taken at age 365. And it says he walked with God and he was not, for God took him. And in the literature, from the first and second temple, this is, especially from the second temple, this is understood to mean that God took him to heaven physically. So he ascended, or was assumed, I should say, like Mary was. And one of a few individuals also with Elijah. The same thing happened to him. So that's the reason he doesn't get a 900-year lifespan. But you'll notice something about Enoch's lifespan. Cy Kellett, how long was Enoch's lifespan in years?
I don't remember.
365.
Oh, that sounds...
What else do you know about the number 365?
It's in the subtitle of one of your books. Also, it's it's the length of a year.
It's the length of a year.
Yeah. Right.
And so that has led to people saying, oh, guess what? Enoch's lifespan is, fantastically long, and it just happens to be the number of days in a year. Maybe that's a clue that this is a symbolic rather than a literal number. And there have even been suggestions that if you look at the ages of the other antediluvian patriarchs, that there are mathematical patterns in them which may indicate that they're symbolic. And some of these, it's even been proposed that these are astronomical mathematical patterns, like is obviously the case with Enoch.
Thanks so much for that question. Just because Enoch got mentioned, I'm going to take this as an opportunity to mention something for you, David, that you might be interested in. We did a long conversation with Tim Staples about the person of Enoch and the mentions of Enoch in the Old Testament, New Testament, and even in the
Did you cover the Book of Enoch?
The ancient Book of Enoch, yeah, which is not a book of the Bible, but
it is if you're an Ethiopian Orthodox.
Thank you. That's very true. Yes. So I think that'll probably be dropped July 26th. But I can't be absolutely certain of the date. But check out Catholic Answers Focus on July 26th. Why isn't the Book of Enoch in the Bible? Where we talk all about Enoch with Tim Staples. Let's go now to Georgia. Logan in Georgia, you are up next. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy Akin.
Hello, Cy and Jimmy. How are y'all?
Very well, thank you, Logan. How are you?
I'm doing very well. I'm a new Catholic, and I spent a little over 2 years looking into Catholicism and becoming Catholic, and of course watching Catholic Answers. And I still, I'm pretty good as far as my understanding, and I don't really have any hang-ups, but I do get asked some hard questions every now and then. And one that has been recent is the correlation or what seems to be a connection between the Star of David and the Star of Remphan, that is mentioned in Acts 7:43.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering, and also the Seal of Solomon.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering if you could enlighten me to how I can answer questions about that, and if they're the same, and where the Star of Remphan came from and where the Star of David came from.
I got to say,
so
Logan, well, first of all, welcome to church. That's the first time I have heard that question, so I am anxious to hear the answer myself.
So I would have to, the first thing, if someone came to me and started making these claims, I'd say, well, show me your evidence. If you're claiming there's some kind of connection between these two things, how do you know that? And what's the quality of the sources that you're relying on for that? Because I know of no scholar who regards the Star of David as having any connection with the Star of Remphan. The Star of David is a symbol that has been used. It was not original. It's just a six-pointed star. It's two intersecting triangles. And it was not originally a uniquely Jewish symbol. It was used in the Middle Ages in some Jewish circles. It was known sometimes as the Seal of Solomon or the Shield of David, but we're talking in the Middle Ages. This is, 1,000 years after the book of Acts was written. Also, it only really became broadly recognized as a symbol of Judaism in the last few centuries. This is actually a really recent development in Jewish iconography. So it's a recent symbol. Now, in terms of the star Remphan or Riphan, depending on which text you're looking at, it's actually referred to not just in Acts, it's also referred to elsewhere. That's entirely different. Now, obviously, you have knowledge of this star and its god that would go by the same name in the ancient world. It was known in the Old Testament period, it's known in the New Testament period, and what it is Saturn. It's just a name for the star or wandering star, Asteres Planetes, the wandering star or planet, Saturn. And like many peoples in the ancient world, some people who were pagan regarded the planets as being deities, or at least having deities. And Saturn was one of those. Because it was one of the wandering stars, it behaved differently than other stars. It attracted correspondingly more attention, and so it was considered in various religious and astrological systems.
Does that help you there, Logan?
That's some knowledge that I've researched myself, and really, I have a hard time trying to convince somebody when you look them up and they look pretty similar. And then there's also the aspect that online, some people will say that it represents the mark of the beast 666. And
is this really just so I know, Logan? One thing I don't is so is this being used in a kind of anti-Catholic way to suggest that something against the Catholic Church?
So you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him think. There's only so much you can do with people. And if they're not willing to be sensible and look at evidence, then at some point you need to say, I'm going to spend my time on something more constructive than trying to convince someone who's not open-minded enough to look at the evidence in a serious, fair-minded way. You can explain to them, look, just because there are parallels between two things does not mean there's a causal connection. There are stars and depictions of stars in every culture because the stars are up in the sky and seen by every culture. Sometimes you're going to see a star depicted with 6 points, sometimes with 4 points, sometimes with 5 points, sometimes with a dot or a circle, but there are only so many ways of accurately depicting what a star looks like. So of course there are going to be repetitions across different cultures. Even if there is a causal connection, that maybe one culture's art decided to borrow an element from another culture's art in how we're going to depict something, that doesn't mean it's sinister. So you might talk to your friends about parallel evolution of ideas, like how stars get depicted in different cultures, and the genetic fallacy. The genetic fallacy is judging something based on where it came from rather than what its own merits are. So basically, correlation is not causation, and judge a thing on its own merits, not by its history.
Logan, as you kind of continue being formed in the faith and also trying to share it with others, I think you'll enjoy Jimmy's 20 Answers book, Anti-Catholic Myths. It does seem like you're working on confronting anti-Catholic myths. So if you want to hang on the line, Nathaniel will get your information and send you a copy of Anti-Catholic Myths. And again, welcome home to the Catholic Church. That's beautiful news. Jimmy Akin, you'll be here another hour with us, yes?
Only if you want me to.
I want you to.
Okay.
All right. Do we need to take a vote, or you'll just go on my?
Well, I'll take your word.
Okay. All right. Jimmy Akin, another hour. Looks like every line is full. So if you are on the line, stay on the line. There will be one line open because Logan will give us his information. We'll send him the book, and then a line will be open. You're welcome to call 888-318-7884. It's open forum. That means open to whatever question you have and open to everyone, whether you are Catholic or not, whether you're Christian or not. We'd be happy to take your call. 888-318-7884. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Jimmy Akin, our guest for another hour of open forum. So happy.
Only if you want me to.
But
I mean, you're sure about this.
I feel absolutely sure about it. We did not take the vote, but I am absolutely certain you would win the vote.
Okay, I'll go along with that.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm glad you feel reassured. I don't want you to feel unwelcome. Our number is 888-318-7884. But man, have lines been full today. So we will work our way through it. Let's go to New York. Am I going to New York? Yes, Austin in New York, watching on YouTube. Go ahead, Austin, with your question for Jimmy.
Hi. So my question is it accurate to say that God can create time and things that change because of his permissive will?
That's not how I would put it. So theologians talk about God having different types of wills. One is a decretive will, where God just says, this is what's going to happen. And then God also can permit things to happen. Now, so for example, God doesn't decree that people sin, let's say commit adultery. Right. God is not going to decree that Joe Schmo commits adultery. But God does decree that Joe Schmo have free will. And then Joe Schmo may abuse his free will and decide to commit adultery, which God permits. So God's decretive will would be that Joe Schmo has free will, and his permissive will is to allow Joe Schmo to abuse that free will. Now, if we take that distinction and apply it to the decision to create, like creating time and creating other things, it seems to me that the decision to create something is part of God's decretive will. God says, let there be light, or let there be time, or let there be small chocolate bunnies, or whatever it may be, and they are. So he may also endow, but I should say, just because something is changeable doesn't mean that God's permissive will is involved, because God can decree things like the hydrological cycle on Earth, where rain falls and then it lays around on the ground for a while, and then it evaporates and goes back up in the sky, and it's all temperature and chemical conditions driving this. Well, those temperatures and those chemical conditions have no free will. So all of this falls directly out of God's decretive will. He's not merely permitting this to happen, or at least you could argue that he's not merely permitting this to happen. He's actually directing it to happen. He wants there to be rain. At least you can argue that. Where his permissive will comes in is for creatures with free will, where he permits them to do something that is either in alignment or contrary to his moral will, to introduce a third element of will, a third kind of will here. But fundamentally, it's not changeability, which is involved in time and processes, that requires God's permissive will. It's moral agency and human freedom.
Austin, did that help you?
Yeah, that was good.
Okay, that's good. Well, you got straight to your question, so I thought I'd come back to you and
double
make sure.
Bonus points for that. Love it when people get to their questions.
As a matter of fact, let's send them a book. Have you got the book, A Daily Defense, 365 Days Plus One to Becoming a Better Apologist, or do you not have it yet, Austin?
Oh, no, I don't have it.
Okay, if you hang on the line, we'll send it to you, because you're thinking deeply about things. You'll love this book. It's got fun stuff for you to think about each day of the year, and you can do it any order you want to. Let's go now. Thank you again, Austin. Just hang on the line. Let's go to Tanner in West Virginia, watching on Catholic.com. Hi, Tanner. You there with us?
Yep.
All right. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
My question is how do I explain in a concise, succinct way to my Protestant grandmother the concept of the real presence and of how adoration works? Because, of course, with Sola Scriptura and all that, the concept of adoration can be construed by some Protestants as quote-unquote idol worship.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the first thing I'd say in terms of explaining the real presence, because that is the first thing that should be explained, because adoration makes no sense if the real presence isn't understood, is, Jesus says in the Gospels, this is my body, this is my blood, and St. Paul in 1 Corinthians says that the bread and wine are a participation in Christ's body and blood, not a symbol, but an actual participation, and profaning the elements. This is you want to read 1 Corinthians 10 and 11 for this material. But that if you receive communion unworthily, you're guilty of profaning the body and blood of Christ, and that can have serious consequences up to and including death. Also, Jesus repeatedly in John 6, when he's challenged about, how could you give us your flesh to eat and your blood to drink and stuff, he doubles down, and he's willing to lose disciples over this. He's even willing to lose the 12. When some of his disciples, who were people that had been regularly traveling around with him, quit over this teaching, he asked the 12, do you want to go too?
Yeah.
That's basically drawing the line, saying, if you're not going to accept my teaching on this, get out of here. And Peter said, no, we know you have the words of eternal life. We're going to believe it no matter how hard it is to accept from a human point of view. And so this has been the understanding of Christians down through history. The Church Fathers accepted this. Catholics accept the real presence. Orthodox accept the real presence. Lutherans accept the real presence. Many Anglicans and Methodists accept the real presence. And so this is actually the majority Christian belief, both down through history and today. People have just taken Jesus to mean what he said, especially given all the different passages and the aspects of them that I just mentioned. So that should hopefully help her understand the real presence. We also have resources at Catholic.com, including like quotations from the Church Fathers about this. You could download those or email her links or whatever you prefer. But once she says, okay, I understand then the real presence, you're ready to progress to the next stage of discussion. I mean, she may not believe the real presence, but if she understands that you do and that the majority of Christians do, then it leads to the next question, which is, okay, so if Christ is really present in the Eucharist, how should we treat the Eucharist?
Right.
It's Jesus. He's there. Do you not want to adore Jesus wherever he is? Now, of course, we can adore Jesus anywhere because he's God, and therefore in his divine nature, he's omnipresent. But if he's chosen to become present in a special way in the Eucharist, then you want to treat him with the respect he deserves. You got to give Jesus his props. And that means that we show reverence to the Eucharist, just like we show reverence to Jesus at his second coming, or we would show reverence to Jesus at his first coming if we were living back then.
Okay, Tanner?
Yep.
All right. Very good. Thank you, Tanner. Perfect timing, too, because we got to take a quick break. Right now, we got a free ebook for you. Well, we try to have a free ebook all the time, and the current free ebook is The Beginner's Guide to Biblical Prophecy, available at shop.catholic.com. Just head over to shop.catholic.com. You'll find the free ebook little tab, and you can download your copy of The Beginner's Guide to Biblical Prophecy.
Let us help you with your question today on Catholic Answers Live.
The Aquinas Writing Advantage program is part of Homeschool Connection's set of online courses for your Catholic homeschool. Homeschool Connection's website is homeschoolconnections.com.
EWTN, Teaching the Truth.
In seeking to cultivate a devotion to the Mother of God, we are simply acknowledging her as the mother of all Christians, our spiritual mother in the faith, and the preeminent Christian disciple. We want to imitate her virtues, follow her in her devotion to Christ when she said, "Be it done to me according to thy word," do whatever he tells you, and ask for her prayers and intercessions.
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live, open forum. Jimmy Akin, our guest. Your calls welcome, whether you are Catholic or not. You can call with whatever question you've got. 888-318-7884. Heading straight out to Virginia now. Renee, watching on YouTube. You are up next, Renee. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Can you hear me okay?
We can, yeah. Go ahead, Renee.
Oh, yeah, great. I'm so excited. I want to tell both of you I love you so much, and thank you so much for what you do.
Oh, thank you.
First of all.
That's very kind. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. So this is a multifaceted question, so I'm going to go quickly because I know you want to get as many people in.
Mm-hmm.
I have listened to you guys, Trent, all the Steubenville folks, Brant Petrie, John Bergsma, and a lot of the ones that are not Cradle Catholic that came into the church. All talk about the church fathers, and that's what brought them into the church. So I have learned so many apologetic things to talk to my sweet, precious Protestant friends, but I had, for the first time, one of them ask me, well, how do I know all of this is true and all the writings? And so my question is, as far as the writings, like the books of the Bible from, when they put the canon together, Rome, Hippo, Carthage, and then the letters of the popes, the letters of the saints, St. Ignatius of Antioch, Eusebius, Irenaeus. So where are all these writings? Are they in a church archive, Vatican archive, a museum somewhere? Are they available to the public?
So the answer will depend on what particular writing you're talking about. In the case of the biblical books, we don't have so we need a term for the original copies of something. And the term that's used in scholarly circles, believe it or not, Psychelid, is autographs.
Yeah, right.
Now, today, autograph means something else. It's where you sign your signature, maybe if you're an author or a famous person or something for somebody. But originally, the term, it comes from Greek roots that mean self-written.
Yeah.
And so you hired your scribe, he wrote it for you, and that's your autograph of whatever book you're doing. Now, interestingly, there can be more than one autograph of a book, because let's say you're Luke. Well, your writing is being funded by your patron Theophilus, and you're going to, of course, give your patron a copy, but you want to keep one for yourself.
Sure.
And you want to give some others to some local churches so they can read them in their liturgies. So what you probably do is have something like, I don't know, a dozen copies of Luke. And because they're all the original edition, they're all autographs. They're all produced at the same time. But there's a problem, because paper products are not immortal. Even if they're written on the tough stuff like animal skins, vellum, and parchment, they're eventually going to decay. Now, what we found from archaeological studies in Egypt, where paper documents, including those written on papyrus, last longest, but what we've learned from them and what we've learned from various libraries around the ancient libraries around the Mediterranean basin is that a book that was a quality product that was kept and in safely in like a library is it could last for a few centuries before it wore out. And so we actually have some references from the church fathers saying things like, oh yeah, they have an original copy of John at Ephesus, and they're writing this like around AD 250 and stuff. So of course these documents were treasured when they came into the possession of the churches, and they took care of them. They'd make other copies for daily use. So we have some evidence that the original autographs of some of the New Testament books were found, for a few centuries in certain churches. Now, the Old Testament is different. We don't have any, and even for the New Testament, we don't have any of the autographs today. What we do have is later manuscript copies, and these are housed in a variety of different institutions. They are housed in museums and libraries and monasteries and places like that. And these days, they're also being housed online. In fact, there is a famous Protestant scholar named Daniel Wallace who is heading a project to digitally, using high-resolution digital images, to catalog all of the New Testament manuscripts in the world and put them online.
Wow.
And he's even discovered some new, because he's going to the monasteries and the libraries and everything around the world, he's even discovered some new ones that scholars didn't know about. These were previously lost manuscripts to scholarship. So that's a really great project. When it comes to writings of church fathers and writings of popes, for example, the same kind of thing applies. For ones that are sufficiently recent, we may have an autograph, and it will be in an archive or a library or a monastery or something like, or a museum. But we also have copies that are in these same kind of institutions. In the case of the Vatican Secret Archives, which I did an episode of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World on just a couple months ago, we talked about how it goes back about 1,000 years, and in some cases a little more than that. But it's basically inter-office correspondence at the Vatican. So it's
you got memos from the year from 1050.
Exactly. You got these papal writings. Many of them are memos, or they're diplomatic writings with various kings or other states. My favorite is a letter that a tribe of Ojibwe Indians sent on birch bark to the Pope to thank him for sending them a bishop. And they're housed in archives. And in terms of, are they open to the public? Well, some of them are. You can go to various archives. Like, for example, if you're in Jerusalem, you can go to the Shrine of the Book, where they have early manuscripts of the Bible from the Dead Sea Scrolls. On the other hand, some archives are more restrictive. Like if you want to go to the Vatican Secret Archives, you can, provided you are a historian. And they don't care if you're a Catholic historian or not. In fact, I've read the application form, and they don't care what your religion is. It's not even asked. What they do want to know is, do you have like a degree in history?
Yeah.
What's your historical project, and what documents are you going to need? And so they can go down into the archives and bring them up for you.
Wow.
But in principle, all this stuff, there's nothing highly secret about this. The reason they don't let everybody come in is because, they don't want Cheeto stains on the precious ancient documents, and they don't want people spilling their Coke and coffee on them and causing it to rot. So they do want to protect the documents precisely because of how valuable they are. So they want people who are trained to handle historical documents and knowing things like library science and how to handle such delicate materials.
Renee, thanks very much for that question. Jimmy, you mentioned that some of a church father might have said they have an autograph of John's gospel in Ephesus, but today we don't.
They're all
those.
gone.
They're all gone.
It's too. The problem is that Europe has too moist a climate.
Yeah.
And so parchment and papyrus will have decayed after 1,700 years.
Yeah.
Where we find original ancient documents, including autographs, is arid places like Egypt, where you can have even a big trash dump containing documents. Like there's a famous one at a place called Oxyrhynchus in Egypt. And we'll find original documents, including letters people wrote to each other and bills of sale and stuff like that. And sometimes we find copies of biblical books or other religiously significant books, but the problem is it doesn't say this is an original copy on it. So it's probably, and usually we can tell it's a copy because penmanship changes over time. So just like, if you look at how letters were written in the year 1900, they had that flowery cursive script, and almost nobody writes letters that way today.
Yeah.
Well, paleographers are people who study how writing changes over time, and they can date when a copy was made by the way it's written. And so we can usually tell, this isn't an original, it's a copy.
I watched Nova. You might have seen, I don't know if you saw this episode, but about how they're using CAT scans to look into documents that are fused.
Yes,
Isn't that one? So I think they're going to find so many new things now, just because there was no technology to look into a document that the pages had fused together before. And now you can.
Yeah.
That's a treasure trove.
And you know what I want them to find?
Yes, I do. I don't. It's Papias.
Yes, the exposition of the Logia of the Lord by the 2nd century author Papias.
Maybe they will.
Also, they do the same thing with other things, like using internal scanning on the Antikythera mechanism.
Oh, yeah, they've looked inside of that thing, yeah.
We now know a lot about it. This is a device from around 2,000 years ago that was found on the seafloor off the coast of Greece, and we now know a ton about it. It's basically an astronomical calculator that will let you tell where the planets and stars are going to be, and it has all these cool little features that are just amazing. Like it'll calculate, you can run it forwards and backwards in different years in time, and it'll tell you what Olympiad this is going to happen in and stuff like that.
This is another thing I think we're learning from these discoveries, is that the ancient people were much more advanced and much more capable of many things than
some of them were.
Than we assume.
It's basically an astronomical computer, and there are only a few people in the ancient world who could have done it, who had the astronomical knowledge to build this.
Yeah.
So we have a pretty good idea. It's one of a few people.
Oh, that's so fascinating. Just fascinating. The other thing, you probably know all about this because you know so much about Egypt, but the funerary masks of Egyptians.
Oh, the mummy masks, yeah.
Yeah, often made out of just like
Paper
old paper
mache.
that was sitting around. So once they can read those funerary masks with the CAT scans, who knows what's in there? Who knows what they made them out of?
Indeed, yeah. There was claims a few years back that a fragment of a very early copy of the Gospel of Mark was recovered from a mummy mask.
Wow. It's an exciting time. If you're interested in the ancient world, William. Once again, I just want to say thanks, Renee, for that wonderful question. William in Portland, Oregon. You're next. William's listening on the new and improved, and earlier called Slick Catholic Answers Live app. William, go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hi, how you guys doing?
Very well, thank you.
My question, coming from a Protestant background, is about baptism for adults.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked through pretty much every common objection to the church, but one thing that still rubs me a bit the wrong way is, especially for a church that believes in infant baptism for people who have no knowledge of the faith, is making people wait, a year or two of RCIA courses to get baptized. And the reasoning I usually hear is to kind of make sure they know what faith they're getting into. But that doesn't make as much sense to me when I, put it in context of infant baptism and then confirming them later. And so my question is, one, I guess, what is the, best argument, I guess, for why the church would make people wait when I see, in Scripture, the prison guard and the eunuch getting baptized right away?
Yes.
And also, is it, official canon law? In theory, could I be a faithful Catholic and still, not rebel against my priests and bishops, but, push for, a rethinking of baptizing adults a little more soonly, and then
soonly, I love that word.
Them later.
All right, William, thank you. Great questions.
Yeah, so this is a matter of discipline rather than doctrine, and so as a result, it is possible. There's no minimum or maximum waiting period. There's no required waiting period in principle for baptism, and so even today, where it's normal under the national statutes for the catechumenate here in the United States to wait a year or two, there are always emergency provisions. If someone's in danger of death and they understand, okay, there's God, He's a Trinity, His Son is Jesus Christ, He died for your sins, you can be baptized right now if it's an emergency. And so there's no intrinsic reason why baptism needs to occur at a certain point of time. If an adult understands the basic points of the Christian faith, they can, in principle, be baptized, which is why we see the Ethiopian eunuch being baptized so soon. It's why we see the Philippian jailer being baptized so soon. It is, in principle, possible to have very rapid baptisms, but it's a question of what's prudent. Now, in the case of an infant, infants are not able to reject the teaching of the Christian faith when they are baptized. So it's not like, oh, well, now that I'm a baby and I've just been baptized, I decide to reject the idea that God is a Trinity.
Yeah, right. Babies
can't do that. And so they're going to be, and because babies are hardwired, whatever culture they're in, they're hardwired to absorb knowledge from their parents and other adults. They're going to be raised in the faith, and in the course of time, they'll come to understand what a Trinity is. And unless they abuse their free will, they will come to accept the idea that God is a Trinity. But an adult is a totally different situation. Christianity and Jesus himself made some very surprising claims, hard sayings, as the Gospel of John puts it, and it can take longer for an adult to reconcile his belief system with the teaching of Jesus and the teaching of the church. In some cases, it may happen very quickly. There's more to say about this, though, so
Okay.
we'll say it on the other side of the break.
Okay, if you can, hang on, William, and we'll check in to make sure that we answered your question. But Jimmy Akin is our guest. It's open forum. Call, ask anything you want. 888-318-7884, the number. More of that right after this.
Here's a question. Is it really possible to be friends with someone who died 2,000 years ago? Maybe the problem is that we've grown way too comfortable with the story of Jesus. Nice man, right? Taught us to love one another, said not to judge people. We celebrate his birthday every year. It's time to put away this small, safe version of Jesus, says Cy Kellett. Nobody that bland could have transformed the world. In A Teacher of Strange Things, Cy presents Jesus Christ undiluted by sentiment, with all his radical words and deeds uncensored. Do you know someone, your son or daughter perhaps, or maybe your mom or dad, who needs the friendship of Jesus Christ? Do you? Order your copy of A Teacher of Strange Things by visiting shop.catholic.com today or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Catholic Answers is doing it again. We're holding our 7th annual Apologetics Conference this September in beautiful San Diego, California, and we'd like to see you there. Join us September 23rd to 26th for a lively and inspiring conference with an all-star lineup of speakers guaranteed to jumpstart your faith. It's a great chance to meet all your favorite Catholic Answers apologists and very special guests as we spend 4 days talking about worshiping and adoring our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. This is where it all begins. Don't miss what promises to be the event of the season. Join us this September for a conference that is sure to ignite, inspire, and inform your faith. Seats are still available, but they're going fast. Enter promo code EARLY to save $30. Visit CatholicAnswersConference.com or call 888-291-8000 to register.
Catholic Answers Live.
What's the one mistake you'll never make again?
That's tomorrow on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie on most of these EWTN stations.
Now back to Catholic Answers Live.
I don't know if you're trying to be popular, Brandon, but you are getting popular by playing the groovy music twice. Nicely done. Thank you for that groovy music. When we went to the break, Jimmy was in the midst of answering William's question, William from Portland, Oregon, about why it takes so long for a Catholic to be baptized. I mean, you already answered his question about, is it okay for me to disagree with the church on this? Because it's
disagree with the church is too strong.
Okay, all right.
Because
Fair enough.
that would suggest to a normal person disagreeing about a matter of doctrine.
Right.
And this is not a matter of doctrine; it's a matter of prudence.
Yeah. Okay.
But I'm going to loop back to that.
Okay.
So it is possible for an adult to get baptized very quickly, understanding only the core elements of the Christian faith, and we see examples of that in Scripture. But that doesn't mean that's always going to be the best approach, because we also have warnings in Scripture, like where Jesus says, "Count the cost. If you're not going to follow this through, it's better not to start." And Peter says exactly the same thing. It is better not to have known the way of truth than to embark upon it and then turn back.
Yeah.
And so you can actually get yourself in worse trouble if you accept the Christian faith and then later fall away from it. So it does make sense to have some kind of probationary waiting period to make sure someone's really serious about this. That doesn't mean a year or two, but it makes sense to make sure someone understands the faith, knows where they're getting into, and is firm. But emergency situations can be different. So, Psychelet, when Philip encountered the Ethiopian eunuch, who was heading back to Ethiopia at that moment, did he have time for a probationary period?
Nope.
No. If he was going to get baptized, it needed to be right then, because he's the first Christian in Ethiopia. There was no one there to baptize him.
Right.
Similarly, St. Paul is on the second missionary journey when he visits Philippi in Acts 16. The Philippian jailer and his family. How long is Paul hanging around on his second missionary journey?
Yeah, right. He's just long enough to basically say hello.
Right.
I mean, it's not, and to share the message.
Right.
Yeah,
so if these people are going to be baptized, it's going to have to be fast because of the circumstances. But then, as the church spread and as it became persecuted in later centuries, there were going to be situations where pressure was actually put on Christians to leave the faith. And so it could be more reasonable to say, let's delay baptism for a while and make sure you're really serious about it. And some people would even get baptized only like right before they were going to be martyred.
Right.
And so there can be a range of pastoral circumstances that make it more or less appropriate to have a waiting period of a given length. Personally, I'm not a fan. I'm especially not a fan of the 2-year thing that you find in some places. A year, well, it wouldn't be my preference, but I find it more reasonable. But whatever, I kind of see an argument for let's get baptized at Easter.
Yeah,
there's that's kind of appropriate. A year could be a reasonable length, given that the circumstances today are different than when the Ethiopian eunuch is leaving for Ethiopia right now, and Paul is just passing through Philippi and isn't coming back for years. So I think somewhat longer is reasonable. I mean, if it were up to me, I don't know, I'd probably gauge it by the individual. For some people, it might be weeks or months. For some people, it might be a year. For people who are having trouble making up their minds, it might be longer than a year. But whatever your opinions may be, William, on what you think would be prudent, because this is a matter of prudent discernment, you absolutely could write the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops or your own bishop and say, hey, I think this question ought to be looked at again, and here's what I think would be a good idea.
Thanks, William. Again, so many folks on the line. We're going to keep moving. We'll go to Bob in Boston now, listening on EWTN. Bob, thank you for your call. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy. Hi, Bob.
Nice listening to you. Hi, how have you been?
Very well, thank you. Go ahead with your question.
So, I'm a little baffled, okay? The mystery of God is a mystery, and yet there's a great sense of faith that comes from people who expound this is the way things are. And even Jesus said only the Father knows. So that's where I'm a little baffled when, the fathers of the church are given as and I use my words loosely, so don't hold to
That's okay.
So if you can offer some sense as to how we derive that the fathers of the church are the, lack of a better word, the experts, I appreciate your response to that.
Okay, so God is a mystery in the sense that God exceeds the ability of the human mind to understand. And that's not surprising because he's infinite and we're finite, and our minds are finite. So there's always going to be just a limited amount of things that we can understand about God. But that doesn't mean we can't understand some things about God. God has given us the gift of reason, and by various means, we can reason out certain things about God. St. Paul, for example, says in Romans that certain facts about God, like his existence and his immortal nature and his power, are things that we can reason to simply by looking at the created world. So by looking at the created world, we can deduce, oh, the created world must have a creator, and he must be really powerful to make this created world, and the created world is really old, so God must be immortal. And we can reason out certain things about God. But there's still going to be an infinite number of things we can't reason for ourselves about God. And so if we're going to know those things, God has to tell us about them. And that's what divine revelation is. Divine revelation is when God reveals something about himself to mankind that we wouldn't otherwise know, like the fact that he's a Trinity. But then once he's revealed it, we can understand it, at least to the extent our minds will allow it. Among the things that God revealed to us and that Jesus talked about is the fact that he will guide the church. Jesus himself said, I will be with you unto the end of the world. And he also promised the Holy Spirit would guide the disciples into all truth. And St. Paul talks about the church, therefore, as the pillar and foundation of the truth, meaning the truth about God in the world. And so the church is divinely guided by God. And that means that over the course of time, God will guide the Christian people in a general way to understand him and to understand different things about him. But because Jesus chose to have a hierarchy that leads his church, which originally started, with the 12 apostles, but it came to include the successors of the apostles, the bishops, they're guided in a special way by God. And the church fathers, by and large, were bishops in their age, and so they received special guidance from God. They didn't get new revelation. The Bible was already finished, but they were guided to understand it correctly, and over the course of time, by putting things together from that God had revealed in the Bible and in sacred tradition, they were able to formulate the Christian faith in a clear way. And so we can have confidence because of Christ's promises that he would guide his church, and we can then simply trust his church as a result.
Bob, thank you for the call. I hope that was helpful to you. We have to take another break. We'll be right back with more Open Forum with Jimmy Akin.
Hang on. Catholic Answers Live will return in a moment.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Go forth and preach the good news. It's not just a suggestion. If you want to take more seriously the command of Jesus to share the gospel with those around you, consider joining St. Paul Street Evangelization. It's a grassroots organization that brings the Catholic faith to the streets in a non-confrontational way. Visit our website, www.streetevangelization.com, to learn more. And don't forget to like us on Facebook. It's time to do our part.
Faith is a precious gift from God. As the largest religious media network in the world, EWTN has an important role in educating others about our Catholic faith and spreading the good news of salvation. We invite you to explore our numerous pages of historical faith documents, prayers, teachings, and other current issues in Catholicism today. Visit EWTN.com and click Catholicism. EWTN, the Global Catholic Network.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Jimmy Akin is our guest. I know lots of parents would like to have good reading material for the kids around, some things that might tempt them to read something positive and helpful. And we've got some...
Like what, Cy Kellett, host of Catholic Answers Live?
Why, thank you for asking, Jimmy Akin, apologist. We've got 3 great graphic novels that are available to you. The Truth is Out There, followed by The Big Picture, followed by The Weapons of War, and they're fun graphic novels with spaceships and all kinds of cool stuff in them that also help young people to kind of work their way through the big questions and get some answers to the big questions. You like them, Jimmy?
I haven't read them all. I'm not a kid, but I love comic books and graphic novels, so I'm in favor in principle.
All right, see? Jimmy Akin, I'm in favor in principle. What a beautiful review. But you can get all three of them together now. Set them out on the coffee table. You don't know. Maybe this summer the kids will pick them up. They're available, all three, the group together, for just $30 with free shipping at shop.catholic.com. Shop.catholic.com. Now we're going to Oregon. Calvin in Oregon, watching on YouTube. You there with us, Calvin?
Hi, how are you?
Very well, thank you.
Okay. I've just been recently watching the Godfather movies, and there was a question that all of a sudden got me wondering.
Okay.
Why has the church historically supported the mafia?
Whoa, dude.
Really? Okay, go ahead.
What do you mean by that?
Okay. When I watch that, even though in the movie it's fiction, there is historic precedence to the things that happen in the movies, in those three films. For example, giving awards to Catholic dons, letting Catholic dons take communion, keeping them as in the church, but not saying, hey, look, what you're doing is wrong. We're not going to support you. We're not going to take your money. We're not going to take any of this stuff from you. You're not. We don't because.
Yeah. Okay. We got the picture, Calvin.
So,
Hang on. Let's let Jimmy take a stab
we're
at
throwing
it.
quite a number of things on the table there. So the first thing is the Catholic Church does not support the mafia and has not supported the mafia historically. There is such a thing as legitimate cooperation with other people, even when they're doing something evil. The classic example of this involving the mafia would be, suppose there is a hit that's going to be put on a member of the mafia by another member of the mafia. Well, at least according to the stories I've heard, there have been priests who have been called in the middle of the night to give this guy the last rites before the hit is put on him. It's like he's a hostage, he's going to be killed. The question is, does the priest do everything in his power to save this guy's soul first or not?
Yeah.
Well, okay, this is a bad situation. This person should not be being killed. But if I were a priest, I would go and help do my best to save this guy's soul before he's killed. Now, you're talking about some other stuff. You mentioned giving awards or giving communion or things like that. Let's take the example of giving communion. Priests are required by canon law to give communion to anybody unless they are obstinately persevering in manifest grave sin. Now, if you're a mafia member, you are in grave sin and you are persevering in it. The question is, are you doing so in a manifest way so that it's obvious to members of the public? If the answer is no, then the priest is going to be required to give communion to that person. And that's true not just of people who are committing grave sin in the mafia, it's true of anybody. The priest is not obliged and is prohibited from saying, oh, I'm sorry, you're too much of a sinner, I'm going to deny you communion publicly. Right. Because that reveals something about the person's inner spiritual state, and it's going to decrease the odds that this person will repent and go to confession if the priest has been publicly shaming him by turning him away at communion time because of secret sins. It's only when there are huge, massive public sins that it becomes reasonable as a matter of scandal to say, I'm sorry, we're not going to give you communion. Then you mentioned something like giving awards. Well, again, it's going to depend on what is known about the person. If it's known that he's a criminal, well, I would say he absolutely shouldn't be given an award. But if he presents himself as a legitimate businessman and a philanthropist in the community, well, then he might get an award for something. To the extent that there is any cooperation, it's not on the part of that's illegitimate here. Any support or approval, it is not on the part of the church as a whole. In fact, if you look at the preaching of the popes, especially Pope Francis recently, he's been very adamant. And previous popes have too. They've condemned criminal activities. If you look in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, or the Catechism of the Council of Trent, or the Catechism of Pius the Tenth, you're going to find abundant statements condemning murder and prostitution and stealing and all kinds of things that the mafia is involved in. So it's not that the church approves. You may have an individual priest somewhere who is slack in his moral duties, or who is corrupt, or who is not making the proper prudential calculations in how he handles certain situations. But that's an individual. That is not the church as a whole. So it is a gross mischaracterization to assert that the church supports the mafia or has historically. It absolutely does not.
Does that convince you, Calvin?
Yeah, it sounds a little better.
I'm glad. I'm going to make you feel a lot better, Calvin. Hang on. I'm just going to read you something, a quote from Pope Francis, who met with and celebrated Mass with hundreds of victims of the mafia in the year 2014. So this is years ago. And these are the exact words but that the Pope said to the mafia. There is still time to avoid ending up in hell. That is what is waiting for you if you continue on this path. You have a father and a mother. Think of them. Cry a little and convert. Those are the exact words of our current Pope to the mafia quite recently, but early in his pontificate.
Yeah, I was going to mention Pope Francis has warned mafiosos they're going to hell.
Yeah. So what do you think, Calvin? Is it helping?
Thank you. Actually, you helped me clear up a lot better than,
than Jimmy Akin did?
What I was going
awesome.
for.
That's not what he meant. He meant us cumulatively.
I don't know. You can sometimes be singular.
Well, that's true. It's in English, you can be singular. All right, Calvin, glad we got you out of the mafia. No, I'm just kidding. I know you weren't in the mafia. Let's go to Los Angeles. Cindy in Los Angeles watching on YouTube. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hi, thank you. Okay, so my friend got married when she was very young, and I guess it was by a priest. She married a Catholic guy and got divorced. She got remarried, and she has a family, and she's good with them. And then she goes to our RCIA, and she's 8 months into it, and all of a sudden the priest asks her about her marriage, and she says, yeah, I got married, but I was never baptized. And he tells her, well, now you can't complete RCIA, and you have to go get an annulment. And so now she's very discouraged, and she's going and looking to other churches, non-denominational.
So you want,
and I'm just
what are her options?
What are her options? Because from what I read, as long as you're not baptized, that marriage isn't even. She didn't even know that any of this.
All right. Well, I think we got it. I'm just rushing you because we're getting near the end.
The fact that her friend was not baptized doesn't mean the marriage wasn't valid. People who are not baptized can have valid marriages. The church does have procedures for dissolving a marriage, because if a person is not baptized, they can have a valid marriage, but it'll still be a natural marriage. And because it's still a natural marriage, it is possible for the church to dissolve it by the authority that Christ gave. In this case, since she was an unbaptized person marrying a baptized person, it would be what's known as a Petrine privilege. But an annulment is the more common way to go in this situation. I would express sympathy for your friend, because this should have been handled earlier than 8 months.
Yeah.
It's gonna take some time, because Jesus does say in the Gospels, look in Mark chapter 10, for example, or Romans chapter 7, what Jesus and what St. Paul say about divorce. If someone divorces their spouse and marries another, it's going to be adultery. And so the church has to take the teaching of Jesus seriously here. It has to look at that first marriage and say, well, was it valid or not? The church, even though it's difficult for an individual in this situation, they should understand that the church is actually doing its best to be faithful to the teaching of Jesus here. And that's what you want in a church. That's not a bad sign for the Catholic Church. It's actually a good sign for the Catholic Church that the Catholic Church is not willing to simply ignore or dismiss what Jesus said, but is actually taking it seriously. And so I would express sympathy and say, well, it's bad that this was brought up so late. We should have gotten to work on this earlier. It is actually possible for her to go ahead and be baptized if she's living chastely, but she either needs to get an annulment or she needs to see about having this marriage dissolved. The way to go about doing that is not by pulling out and going elsewhere. It's by continuing to be involved in the parish, and the pastor or other people at the parish can help her get the paperwork started to start getting this in process. The key thing, and I understand this because when I was in the process of coming into the Catholic Church, I had a priest who did something that was very painful to me.
Yeah.
And Scott Hahn once told me he was surprised I didn't walk away at that moment.
Yeah, right.
But I recognized that this is God's church. This is the church Jesus founded. And whatever I have to do to become part of it, that's what I need to do. God didn't promise that it would be easy. God promised that he would get me through the trials of life. And so I'm going to stay faithful to God and do whatever I need to get into his church, even if it costs me something, and even if I have to face disappointments like a priest who was asleep on the job and did something he shouldn't have, like wait too late to discuss this.
Yeah.
So I would encourage your friend to continue to look at the evidence for the Catholic Church. Maybe we could send Cindy a copy of my short book, The Words of Eternal Life.
Oh, yes.
That
let's do
she
it.
could give to her friend, and that would help her, see some of the evidence for the Catholic Church in particular and give her encouragement on staying the course.
Cindy, you just hang on the line. Nathaniel's going to get your information, and we'll send you The Words of Eternal Life, one of Jimmy's latest books. I'm going to go real quick to Tom in Twin Cities watching on Facebook Live. Tom, you have to be quick with your question if you want an answer from Jimmy, because we're getting near the end.
Okay, I'm wondering if the nativity narratives of Luke and Matthew fit together well, like the presentation and the slaughter.
They do.
Of innocents.
You are asking the right guy, Tom.
In fact, since I don't have time to go through them in detail, what I'll do is I'll refer you to an article where I discuss exactly how they fit together, and it's called How the Accounts of Jesus' Childhood Fit Together. And it's at jimmyakin.com. So if you just Google How the Accounts of Jesus' Childhood Fit Together, Jimmy Akin, or if you just Google Infancy Narratives, Jimmy Akin, it should come right up for you.
Okay, Tom?
Fantastic.
Yep. And I read that one. I also read you did one on
the resurrection narratives.
Right? Was there a third one? Because I don't remember if I missed one.
What other narratives are there that need to be harmonized?
Okay. No, I just couldn't remember. But they're great. You're going to love it, Tom. It's going to get into just exactly what you wanted to get into. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Let us go now. Hang on real quick. I think I'm going to Kyler in Edmond, Oklahoma, listening on EWTN. Kyler, thank you so much for your call. You got to be quick if you want an answer from Jimmy.
Okay, so I was wanting to know in the Old Testament, which I'm reading right now,
God
I
bless
feel
you.
like a lot of the prophecies that are being mentioned, they talk more about servants of God. How do we know that they're talking about a Messiah?
So the way prophecy works, it can refer to more than one thing. An example is in the book of Revelation, where John sees a beast that has 7 heads, and we're told in the book of Revelation that the 7 heads represent both 7 mountains and 7 kings. So a single prophecy can refer to more than one thing. In the case of Old Testament prophecies, a prophecy may refer to Jesus, but also to other servants of God as well. And so we shouldn't think about it as it has to refer just to Jesus. The fact is, Jesus said that these Old Testament prophecies referred to him, and then he rose from the dead. which proves his place in God's plan. So we can trust Jesus because he rose from the dead when he teaches us things like I'm included in that prophecy.
Kyler, you did a great job asking that question really quickly. If you want to hang on the line, we'll send you, if it's okay with who's ever the responsible adult in the home, we'll send you a copy of The Truth Is Out There, the graphic novel from Catholic Answers Press, one of the 3 graphic novels from Catholic Answers Press. Jimmy Akin, senior apologist, thank you very much.
Cy Kellett, host of Catholic Answers Live, my pleasure.
And we're going to find out about the weird world tomorrow on Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World.
And Pauline Dakin's Secret Childhood.
All right, I'm looking forward to it. Tomorrow we got Joe Heschmeyer. We'll see you then, God willing, right here at Catholic Answers Live.